This is Investor Perspectives. I'm the host of Investor Connect, Paul T. Martin, where we connect startups and investors for funding. In our new Investor Perspectives series entitled How to Solve the Biotech Life Sciences Problem, you'll hear about the changes expected in the biotech life sciences sector in the coming 12 months. As the COVID pandemic passes, we emerge into a new world. The biotech space is now undergoing tremendous change as we shift back to a normal way of life. The process for designing and approving vaccines demonstrated a new protocol. Biotech now moves into a new era. We have investors and startup founders describe the changes coming up. We hope you enjoy the show. Need help in finding investors for your startup, fund, or angel group? 10 Capital provides funding as a service helping you find accredited investors. Contact 10 Capital to gain access to investors for angel and venture capital funds, family office rounds, and syndication raises. To learn more, go to 10capital.group. Our first guest is Yaniv Snior, co-founder of Mid-Atlantic BioAngels. Mid-Atlantic BioAngels is a New York-based life science angel investor group that invests exclusively in therapeutics, devices, and diagnostic companies worldwide. Yaniv, thank you for joining us again. And so what changes do you expect to see in the coming 12 months in this space? What should we be looking for?
So we've been having this active discussion within our group because the different folks have different opinions. I'm of the opinion that this is, the amount of money that's been pouring into this industry is huge, and I think that it's unsustainable. And I think that at some point the public won't have an appetite for that many IPOs. And when you don't have that many IPOs coming out, then there aren't that many returns to the funds. And when there aren't that many returns to the funds, the amount of money being raised and being invested slows down, etc. Whether it'll happen in the next 12 months or not, I have no idea. The other thing that I'm seeing, when you have companies that are raising money at increasingly higher valuations, and perhaps companies that wouldn't have normally been able to raise money in the past, that's unsustainable because it means that more investments will end up without a return to their investors. So the argument we're having internally is how long will that take for all this, if you want to call it bubble or whatever, for all this to sort of correct itself. I'm usually a Chicken Little type guy, so I usually think it's going to happen sooner than later. I'm usually wrong. so I'll be the first to admit that I'm probably wrong, and I think it'll take longer than 12 months. But there are a lot of other factors around this whole thing. How much money is being pumped into the economy by the government stimulus and other things that are happening around us and how people choose to deploy their funds. And, I also think that the life science sector has grown up to the point that a bright light has been shown on it recently because of the pandemic and other things, that many people who perhaps weren't actively invested in that segment before are saying, we want to get in. We realize there's a lot of opportunity here. So I think we have new investors coming in, additional money. We have people who want to capitalize on success that has already been seen. So I think that my colleagues may be right when they say that it's going to be longer than 12 months for this whole thing to change, this whole picture to change.
Appreciate your taking time to share that with us today. How best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
So our group has a LinkedIn group. You can find it BioAngels. We have a Twitter account, also BioAngels. You can always send us an email to info@bioangels.net. Remember, not .com, but .net. And it reaches our interns and a bunch of us, the founders, etc. So that's usually the best way to do it. And if companies are seeking funding, the best way for them to do is to go to our website, look at our investment criteria, which I mentioned to you, but everybody thinks that they match. But look at our investment criteria and submit an application, at which point we have a screening process that we do on a regular basis, and we have an entire group of people looking at these applications. So by all means, submit an application that way, or people who want to join us as members either of our active group or of our sidecar fund, which indexes our investment, can always send an email to info, or there's a contact us link on our website as well to reach us.
Great. We'll put those in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up again soon.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Always lovely to talk to you, Hal.
Our next guest is Carter Williams, CEO and managing partner at iSelect Fund. iSelect Fund is an early-stage venture firm that invests in companies that are addressing critical global issues in large markets with financially attractive business models. They're based in St. Louis, but they take a national view with a regional focus outside the coast and on companies making an impact. Carter, thank you for joining us. So what changes do you expect to see in this space in, say, the coming 12 months? Anything coming up very soon?
I think you're going to see, we've had 3 or 4 IPOs that have come to market. The buy-side analysts really don't understand the market. They understand it like, oh, you got a combine, does it produce some corn? But they don't understand it like they understand Genentech. So if you think back to when Genentech came to market, nobody knew how to price it. There weren't any other companies. Now you're going to have, I think there are probably about 10 companies that will come to the public market over the next 12 months that, Benson Hill, Beyond, Impossible may go public. App Harvest went public. I think there are others I'm aware of that are sort of coming down the pipe. And I think what's going to happen a year from now, people are going to say, this is a different market. Look at a Benson and a Ginkgo and a Zymergen are running our 100x revenue valuations, where most of the people in the ag market have been 5x revenue.
Wow.
And I think that you're going to just see a different kind of it. The public markets are going to recognize the opportunity, and it's going to trigger a whole nother level of thinking. And I think trigger a whole nother level of investment and interest in the private side of the business. And we've been seeing this since 2014, and it seems pretty normal to us. But when I spend time with people and tell them what we're doing, they just are really fascinated. And it's mundane to me almost now, having done this since 2014. And so I think we're going to see a recognition about the opportunity, and I don't know where that will only lead somewhere positive. I just don't know where it will be.
Well, in terms of the ag tech space, what else should we talk about? One question I've always had is, given the cost of healthcare and given how much is driven by food and nutrition, why isn't there more going on to improve that space from a regulatory angle? And is that driving any investment into the space that we're talking about here? Is healthcare?
Yeah, we've been talking. The regulatory space has always been terribly unimaginative. There has been some discussion about, if nutrition matters so much, why don't we have a Department of Nutrition?
Right. Yeah.
That has wandered around DC for the last 5 years. I think the first time I heard it mentioned then was 5 or 4 years ago, and still doesn't have a hook. There are a lot of entrenched interests, I think, in terms of we need a medical solution for this, and they're really not the right kind of advocates for nutritional. And we don't really understand the correlation between better nutrition and, at a policy level, we don't understand the correlation between better nutrition and such. So I'm a tad pessimistic on it in that dimension. And I like operating in a realm where we have a little bit of freedom to move around. I'm a strong believer that entrepreneurs, if you need to solve a tough problem, it's not a bad idea to put an entrepreneur on it. But I do think that you might see something like a Department of Nutrition come forward. I've seen on a bipartisan side, there's interest in that. And the Ag Committee is one of the more consistently bipartisan policy type of committees on the Senate and the House side. And so you might see something on that. I think with COVID, we're going to see COVID, one as a vascular disease rather than a pulmonary disease, probably we'll learn it's more of a vascular disease. And I think we will learn more about inflammatory effects in the system as a result of what we saw in COVID. And if you look back at AIDS, modern day immunotherapy really owes its creation to the discoveries we've made in AIDS in 85. And oddly, had AIDS not come along, we may not have made those discoveries for another 40 years, but we did. And we had a better understanding of virology and how that affected the system. In a similar way, I think that COVID is going to cause a lot of researchers to look at inflammatory effects. And what we're going to find, there have been a lot of hints that Alzheimer's is really type 3 diabetes. There have been some hints that type 2 diabetes. Well, certainly type 2 diabetes is very closely affiliated with refined sugars. And I think we'll find that the gut biome probably has a lot of connectivity into that. And over the next 10 years, we'll really look back and see a different kind of mix. And at that point, I think from a regulatory and policy standpoint, the medical community will sort of catch on and start saying, we now have a much more deterministic and better perspective about how nutrition relates to healthcare, and that will reach a transformational level where somebody says, oh, Jesus, if we do this, we can cut healthcare costs by 40%, 50%. And once you take diabetes and cardiovascular disease from the nutritional components off the table, it's you take out half the cost of healthcare.
Wow. That's a big impact. Well, cool.
It's exciting stuff.
Well, great. Well, appreciate your taking time to share that with us today. How best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
My email is cwilliams@iselectfund.com. I'm on Twitter under J Carter WIL, and that's always a good place to follow. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I can't always respond better in the social environments to just sort of add some comments, but it's hard to respond with the influx of emails, but I try.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll include those in the show notes and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Very good. Thank you.
Our next guest is Maximilian Bade, founding partner at Nucleus Capital. Nucleus Capital is a new venture capital firm supporting purpose-driven entrepreneurs solving systemic challenges to planetary and human health. They are sector-focused and invest in synthetic biology, climate, and food technology, partnering with founders at the nucleus of their journey, investing at the pre-seed stage. Maximilian, thank you for joining us. So in the next 12 months, what changes do you think we'll see in this space?
Well, first of all, from a more broader investor perspective, I think ever more traditional tech funds have realized that synthetic biology is here to stay and that it's a necessary innovation also to fight and combat climate change. And what I think will happen is that we see more Series A rounds being led by established players. One of those examples is that recently Andreessen Horowitz announced their investment in Novel Foods. They led a Series B round, which of course they are a little bit more prone to because they have a life science fund as well. So that it's easier for them to make the switch. But I think also in the European ecosystem and specifically in the German ecosystem, we see many more traditional tech VCs poking into this area, kind of screening companies and trying to find a way of when it is the right time to engage.
Great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, I think we've spoken a lot about, SynBio and SynBio investments, but at the end of the day, I think there's also a kind of sub-niche within the whole synthetic biology realm with this, which is called computational biology. I think that's a very interesting new emerging field where the two disciplines really converge. So computer science and synthetic biology, and where founders are starting to leverage mathematical models as well as AI to be applicable for lab data, make experiments, analysis of experiments quicker, even predict, certain outcomes, as in how should a protein fold or what kind of protein or what kind of composition is the most ideal in a set of controlled conditions, right? And I think this is probably one of the most exciting fields that we are just beginning to see, especially in Europe. And my thesis is that many of those companies are driven by network effects, much like companies or like traditional marketplaces are driven by network effects. And as we've seen in the past of technology, looking at Facebook, looking at LinkedIn, all the big successes in the past, Airbnb, we saw that network effects are one of the strongest factors of defensibility of those companies and also value drivers. And I think having data network effects inside computational biology, let me give you an example. You can have a company that essentially has a proprietary data set, an internal product pipeline, and a data platform, which can be opened to their own customers. So they can develop products themselves internally, but they can also open the platform to external B2B customers to then develop products on top of their platform. And the more people start developing products on the platform, leverage those data sets and leverage the underlying technology, the more powerful it will become. And so there's the data network effect. And I think that's what's going to drive the future in this sub-segment of synthetic biology, which I'm really excited about. So if there's any founders out there who are working on computational biology, please reach out.
Great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Super happy to do so. Thank you, Martin.
Our next guest is Ron Palawoda, president at Palawoda Group. Palawoda Group's evergreen health tech fund targets early-stage innovation that reduces costs to healthcare consumers, including projects that promote cost transparency to help consumers make more informed decisions in selecting service providers. Ron, thank you for joining us. So what changes do you expect to see in the coming 12 months?
It depends on COVID. Okay. Quite honestly, COVID was one of those black swan events that we don't know how it's going to end right now. We think we know, but there are certain political considerations, regulatory considerations that might change our views. I think that comfortably, right now, investors are in a holding pattern. Okay, many investors. If you cannot travel, you cannot visit the facilities of somebody that you want to invest in, which means you cannot vet them. Okay, so what you're relying is in terms of deal flow on deals that you've been looking at and tracking for a longer period of time. Okay, and are much more comfortable in continuing and exploring new opportunities with that set of opportunities. So my advice to an existing startup is to really reduce your burn rate. Obviously you've done that. I'm sure many have done that so far. So reduce your burn rate even further and just see how things go. For early stage startups, it's a lot easier for them to do that than later stage startups because the later stage startups already have that existing overhead. So that's one thing that I would suggest to startups. But I think another trend that we're seeing is a process called acqui-hire, okay, where you've seen a project and you may not invest in it for the purpose of growing that business as an independent business, but you're investing in it as a way of grabbing that talent and merging that talent into your existing portfolio. Okay. So what we've done on our side for a long period of time is because we want to maintain talent within our ecosystem, we have a process called cross-pollination. And I think that that's an advantage that family offices or larger investors have than, let's say, angel investors. That you have this ecosystem and you have the opportunities, you have systems in place to allow talent to move from one project to another and then back to the original project. That allows talent to basically enhance their career development because now they're learning new ways of doing things and then going back to whatever they were doing before. And also it manages the burnout of people. You know, building a business is not a sprint. It's a marathon, okay? And you need to be able to have process and systems in place, not to just manage the business development, but also to manage your wellness, your mental health. And managing burnout is really important, especially in the healthcare sector, because you have such a long period of development. This is not something, a health application will not take over the world in 18 months, okay? It's something that you really need to develop over a long period of time. And you need to be able to sustain your ability and your interest in doing the work. So what we've done is institute a process of cross-pollinations. And we have a team in place through our labs that allows you to, let's say you're working on industrial robotics, okay, and you're doing AI engines for industrial robotics. You're able to then leave that project, move into the genomics space and work on AI engines for genomics, and then acquire some skills and take those back to, building smarter robots. And I think that allows our guys to be much more comfortable that they're maintaining their career development and reduces the number of individuals that go on and do other things outside our ecosystem.
Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, let's see. I think that one of the things that is interesting in the health tech sector that people are really not being as cognizant about is the data privacy issues. Okay. I'll give you an example. Okay. What can you do with the data? Okay. Yes, it's good to collect large amounts of data. As an example, in wearables, one of the advantages of wearables is that, like, the Apple Watch and so on, is that they're tracking your health experiences longer term, longitudinal data. It's longitudinal data, which gives you much more insight about how you're doing than if you go into the doctor's office once a week or once a month and get checkup at that particular time point. Okay, because, for example, blood pressure changes throughout the day, and a wearable will be able to capture that information and provide you better insight about that information than if you just went to the doctor's office, which is a stressful condition anyhow, and got your blood pressure checked at just at one point. So there's a lot of advantages to collecting large amounts of data. But then what do you do with that data? And we're seeing risks with respect to where that data is residing, in what location, in what data center, literally, in what country. We're also seeing risks with respect to who owns that data. Okay. If I want to stay in the Apple ecosystem, does Apple own my data? Do I want to move to another ecosystem? Can I transfer that data? It's my data. Okay. So we're seeing that information. Now you ask yourself, okay, big deal. It's your data. Okay. How valuable is it? Well, I'll give you an example. We're already seeing in the consumer space that large amounts of data are being used to make recommendations to you based upon what to buy. So Amazon, for example, uses your shopping habits and maybe some of your search habits to tailor product recommendations to you. Okay. We also see, obviously, Google using your search patterns to tailor ads to you. Okay. Well, I can imagine a world where Amazon makes recommendations of what to buy based on your medical record. Okay. So they might personalize your food shopping based on your health. That's important information. We already see some of that emerging. So we have, for example, meal kit services like Blue Apron. They're already personalizing menus to your lifestyle preference. So they have vegan menus, etc. But if you opt into integrating your medical record with that consumer experience, they can tailor their meal plans offering to your dietary needs. So vitamin deficiencies, and there are medical conditions that might be better managed through diet. So merging that information there. Okay. And even longer term, I can see where services can scour the latest medical literature to personalize food ingredients to your allergy risks. Okay. Does that add value to that product or that service? Okay. So we're seeing integration of health information and, in some cases, medical record information into other experiences, consumer experiences. And I think that's something that is going to be more prevalent moving forward.
Great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us today. I want to thank you for joining us and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Well, let's stay connected.
Our next guest is Oren Aloni-Charas, Managing Partner at the Global Health Impact Fund. Global Health Impact Fund is a venture fund focused on investing in early-stage healthcare innovation. It is physician-led and physician-driven and leverages the expertise of large networks of physicians and domain experts with its proprietary data science platform. Oren, thank you for joining us again. Well, what changes do you expect to see in the coming 12 months as we're coming out of COVID at various stages? What do you think is going to be the main story around life science and biotech?
So there are a couple of different things that have happened. And one of them is that I think you've seen a lot of money being moved into investment in the space. So that money is going to start to do something, right? You're going to start to see activity. But the other thing that happened was that during COVID, at least on the more medical end of the life sciences rather than consumer-driven products, companies had problems getting into hospitals, doing pilot studies and clinical trials. Like everything slowed down. Some of it screeched to a halt. And that's now, there's a backlog for that. And people, and we've seen it in our companies, are starting to finally get back in and do the things that they needed to do. So it's almost like, I wouldn't call it a hibernation phase that companies went through, but it definitely was like walking through mud instead of running on tarmac. So I think you're going to see a lot of activity starting to happen. You also saw a lot less exit activity, I think, compared to what it could have been without COVID. So I think that's going to change. And in the back of my mind, I'm also curious what the SPAC movement will do to, the healthcare companies as well. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Well, great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, I would love to just mention that, if this is a space you're interested in as an investor, that we are reaching out to new limited partners to build our next fund. And I would love to have that conversation with you. We're very excited. We've made some really great investments and want to continue to do so. Ultimately, our goal, because we come at this originally as doctors, we want to change the world. We want to really make it a better place. And we can do that with capital. It's funny, Hall, because, and I know you've seen this yourself, but the truth is that even though it's just money or even maybe smart money, right, that so many companies struggle to raise funds. And if we can find really good companies, which we do, because we've got such great deal flow, and invest in them, it's entirely possible those companies wouldn't have succeeded. And without that, and so even though we're not the genius behind all of the innovation necessarily, without the support of venture, they don't necessarily happen. So I really feel like it's important. We have to be a part of it. We have to be smart about it. And if somebody's interested in joining us on this journey, I would love to meet them.
Great. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you, Hall. It's been such a pleasure.
Our next guest is Eyal Lifshitz, co-founder and managing partner at Peregrine Ventures. Founded in 2001, Peregrine Ventures is a leading Israeli capital fund that focuses on high-tech companies in various stages in their fields of life sciences, pharma, digital health, and more. Eyal, thank you for joining us again. So what changes do you expect to see in this space in, say, the coming 12 months? What's coming up next shortly?
So what we'll see in the next 12 months, the main thing which really did hurt a lot of medical startups was that they were not able to conduct clinical trials more on the device space. So device companies for the last year and a half were not able really to travel or to go into hospitals, to places where they did the early human trials. We saw almost a standstill there in many companies all over the world. And now we see this slowly opening, and we will see now a boom of clinical trials. We see those companies now going with those procedures into their clinical trials, going through FDA. FDA also understands that for a long time there was a holdup, so data will continue and come in. That's something which we'll see now in the next 12 months. Very interesting how companies will catch up on their clinical trial programs.
Great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I think we covered the important issues. I think that COVID from one side was a big challenge, but from the other side, for our industry, for the life science industry, it put really the light on many areas which were around, like monitoring from home, for an example. These technologies, some of them were around for a long time, but they were not really implemented. Now we see how important it is to keep those patients outside of the system. You don't want them to come to the hospital. You don't want them even to come and see their doctor if possible. And we see how data is important. We see how it's important to know where those patients are, who got a vaccine and when, and to have it into one central system. There are many things which were around, but we didn't really implement them because of many legal and other reasons, privacy and others. And we see how now we have to implement them. Still, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful and not pay a price in privacy. We will not pay a price in quality, but we have to find a way of how to implement and how to make these technologies happen. And in many cases, we already see that.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Hall. Stay safe, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you again.
final guest is Mark Roper, CEO at Orion Biotechnology. Orion Biotechnology is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company focused on discovering and developing best-in-class immunotherapeutics based on novel recombinant chemokine analogs. Their goal is to significantly improve the health outcomes of populations affected by serious diseases in the area of oncology, neuroinflammatory disorders, inflammatory bowel disease, HIV, and others. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Well, in the last few minutes, what we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, I guess the only other thing that I would mention that's important is that we are a pre-revenue company at the moment, and we're basically on the verge as an organization of developing our first revenues through out-licensing and or R&D collaboration deals with large pharma. So we've seen a great deal of interest in our platform technology from some of the larger players in the industry. And we're working towards basically closing some of these deals moving forward. So my hope is within the next 12 to 18 months, we should have that accomplished. And it's very exciting. A big milestone for the company.
And we often go back to metaphors, analogies, or things like that. And I was wondering if you had any analogies that you use to tell the financial side of these groups that you work with, and they always have both. They have the technical and the non-technical, is about how this thing works. Of course, we always focus on the benefits. You can only go so far in explaining how it works to a non-technical person without giving them a master's degree in it. But
Right.
if there's a way of explaining it with an analogy of some kind, what would you put on the table there?
So I would say there's two analogies that can be very helpful. So the first one is that Orion, well, actually there's three, I guess. Maybe we can get your reaction to them. So the first one is that GPCRs, these targets that we're pursuing, are kind of like the traffic cops of your immune system controlling cell trafficking and immune response. And essentially what we're doing with our precision engineered drug candidates is we are instructing your immune system or the traffic cop on how to direct the proper response to, for example, a cancer tumor. Whereas right now what happens is cancer tumors hijack these signaling pathways that GPCRs use, and they send out false signals. And that's why they're able to evade your immune system, and that's how they promote growth and metastasis. So the traffic cop analogy, and what we're trying to do is basically through treatment, be a traffic cop that's directing the traffic in the right way. The second analogy is more of the key in the lock analogy. So these GPCR receptors, you can think of them as a lock, a door lock, for example. And traditional drug modalities are just not, like small molecules and antibodies, they're just not able to precisely fit the lock in order to do what we need them to do. And our precision engineering basically creates drugs that fit like a key in a lock, perfectly fit. And what that does is it provides them with these tremendous attributes, which are very high specificity, high affinity binding, best in class potency, and the ability, most importantly, to modulate the signaling, as opposed to just, like an antibody. If you think about a door and a lock, it's like putting a putty on top of it. You're blocking anything from going in the lock. But what we've done is we've put a key in. So we can block it, but we can also turn the key and issue signaling associated with the receptor.
No, those are great. We should put those in there. Like I say, when we talk to the financial types, I find Ross is a little bit into the details about how the molecules are working and where they attach and where they don't. And it gets to be a little bit detailed, especially when you have a 2 to 3 minute elevator pitch to say everything that you're doing. We have to cover the team and the competition, the market, all those other things we have to get around to, because you've got a good story there as well. This technology thing, we seem to be, and I find if you can get to the benefits of it, we increase productivity by 3x, or we increase effectiveness of the therapy by 4 times. If you have a number like that, that alone can just sell it, because you've got a number on it and you've got the benefit there. And we'll get to the details later, at some point. Do you have any numbers like that?
We do, actually. So for our lead drug candidate, for example, all our we've shown that it is between 14 and 170 times higher potency than the competition. So essentially, superior potency is an attribute of this precision engineering that we have. So for our lead candidate, it's a CCR5 targeted therapeutic. And we've done head-to-head comparison with the other companies that are developing drug candidates to target CCR5 based on small molecule or antibodies. And we've shown we're between 14 and 170 times higher potency. The other area that we can tout is that the platform technology enables us to do this precision engineering and develop drug candidates much more efficiently than was previously possible. And we've shown in the work that we've done a 10 times improvement in efficiency, which is quite significant. So to give you an idea, a drug candidate that might take sort of, let's call it $8 to $10 million to basically get it to proof of concept, preclinical, ready to go in the clinic, we can do the same thing for about $1 million or less.
Wow.
So it's quite significant.
So when you say efficient, you just mean the cost of putting it together, or what exactly is the efficiency in there?
It's really about the amount of time and the resources that are required to basically discover that key that fits perfectly in the lock. To use an analogy.
Build the key.
So, most people aren't aware of this, but drug development to a large extent is serendipitous. They come across something and wow, this could work here. We've taken that and made it a very deliberate and precise exercise where we basically say we've got a receptor and it has a complex structure, and we are designing a molecule to precisely fit all the contacts with that receptor. So it's and that's where we can do it a lot faster now than was previously possible.
Great. Well, we'll put those into the updates as we go forward.
Okay, terrific. Well, it was nice to see you. Thanks very much.
Great. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us today. As always, be sure to leave a review, subscribe to this podcast, and share it with others. Let's go start up something today.